So I'm doing my video on the Mexican Revolution. So the Mexican Revolution was officially started on November 20th of 1910, but nothing really happened until May of 1911, which was when the rebels had won a victory in a battle in Ciudad Juarez. So in 1910, liberals and intellectuals had started to challenge their dictator, which was Porfirio Diaz-Mori. He had been in power for 34 years, and his term was then called El Porfiriato. He had violated many times what was stated in the Mexican Constitution of 1857. So Diaz's motivation in his presidential years was to industrialize and modernize Mexico, basically turning it into a capitalist country. But what he was doing was negatively affecting rural workers and peasants. The way he ruled was mostly through intimidation, and that's how people actually followed what he said. And one of the major reasons the revolution happened is because of the new land laws he had implemented during his term. So he wanted to have stronger ties with the United States and other foreign countries. So he distributed land to wealthy people outside of Mexico. And those inside of living in Mexico had to have a formal legal title in order to own land. So in late 1910, Plan de San Luis Potosí had been made by a man named Francisco Ignacio Madero Gonzalez. And this plan was quickly spread throughout the rebels who wanted to replace dictator Diaz. So the plan's main purpose was to have a democratic republic in Mexico and to have no more unlimited presidential terms like the current president was doing. So in early 1911 in Ciudad Juarez, Chihuahua, a battle was going on, and the forces were led by Pascual Orozco and Francisco Pancho Villa. So Madero supported them, and President Diaz saw what a disaster would occur if he weren't to engage in battle with his own federal forces. So he talked it over with Madero about how to avoid this, and Madero did eventually agree to back off. What Madero was looking for was political stability and not military strength. So he had his own political agendas in mind and saw Orozco and Villa as mere tools, even though they helped him a lot. So when Orozco and Villa found out what Madero was doing, and he let the current dictator keep ruling, which was not what they wanted. So they marched into the U.S. and started provoking the federal forces of Mexico. They were called La División del Norte, and their provocation grew out of control, so Madero just let it happen. So their plan succeeded, and they won the Battle of Ciudad Juarez. But their plan did cause some tension to erupt from property owners since it impacted them negatively. In another state called Morelos, Emiliano Zapata had been recruiting peasants since as early as 1909 to fight for land reform. So a plan they formulated was called El Plan de Ayala, and it was a way to redistribute land to peasants and away from powerful landowners. So in May 1910, Zapata and a group of men had captured a city called Cuautla, and he used a variety of new ways to fight federal forces, such as guerrilla tactics. So when Zapata found out that Madero was more interested in political power rather than land reform, he ran to the hills with his army and continued fighting from there for land. So as Zapata continued his fight, General Victoriano Huerta was sent to stop him, but to no avail. So Madero himself went to negotiate with Zapata, but that did nothing. So the Zapatistas continued their fight for months, and Madero was unable to stop him. Then on May 25th of 1911, Mexico's President Porfirio Diaz resigned and left the country. and Francisco Ignacio Madero Gonzalez was the next president. But his term did not last long, as he was assassinated by Victoriano Huerta, who joined forces with Porfirio Diaz's nephew, who sought power. So after Huerta seized power as president, he was not in favor of most of the population. And then in 1914, President Woodrow Wilson sent Marines to Veracruz in Mexico to support the rebels who were against Huerta. And during those battles, Huerta kept losing the most important ones to the revolutionaries. And in that same year he was elected as president, he resigned and fled the country. So after Huerta left, Venustiano Carranza became president. He was a wealthy landowner and a chief of the Northern Coalition. And then Carranza gathered the revolutionary and military leaders to discuss plans for the future of Mexico. So a plan they made was called Plan de San Luis Potosí, which Villa, Zapata, and their followers did not support. The plan the rebels supported was of land reform, which was called Plan de Ayala. So Carranza lasted a fairly long time compared to the others until that he was assassinated. The reason being for this assassination was he ignored any promises he made to his people. So during his presidency, he finally got the support of the United States, and he presented to Congress a supreme law of Mexico. So to the Mexican Congress, he presented a supreme law. And it was finally approved in 1917, and it was of promised agricultural reform and economic rights to the people of Mexico. And he just did not stick to it, so it resulted in him being assassinated. So after Carranza was assassinated, General Álvaro Obregón became president.